The Rift and other holds alike are home to various locations that have something to hide. Vampires, Draugrs, Daedra, or the Aedra. It's never as mundane as it initially seemed. Located west of Boulder Fall Cave and roughly east of Ivarstead, Redwater Den's exterior foundation is shadowed by a cliff, which camouflages it from the sun to an extent. The exterior resembles an abandoned shack of sorts, which even further adds to the mystery of it all. It seems extremely fragile and looks like it's about to collapse any day now, making it the perfect place to hide an unknown base of operations beneath its carcass. Two men seem to be camped out in the ruins, hastily patrolling the area, eliminating any potential threats or ambitious travelers that accidentally stepped into their territory. And to us, these men are known as vampire thralls. I mean solely because this video game we're playing can magically and accurately predict the nature of the enemy we're battling. Vampire thralls are mortal men, or mer, under the influence of master vampires, and their new purpose in life is to serve their new vampiric supervisors. And this is exactly why they're usually seen guarding specific entrances or accompanying other lesser vampires. Once the first set of thralls are taken care of, one can encounter a trapdoor that leads to a basement, and in this basement we're welcomed by a doorman, which could also be a vampire thrall. But this time he doesn't automatically attack the player. Instead, he asks the player to unsheath his weapons before he can let the player into the establishment. And surprisingly, upon listening to his demand, we're let into what seems like a drug den. Yes, you heard me right, a drug den. Immediately upon walking down the steps, we're greeted by a dealer that offers us their specialty, Redwater skooma. Both the dealer and supposed attendant that looks after the junkies overdosing on this new breed of skooma are probably vampires themselves. The drug den consists of booths inhabited by heavily drugged peasants, bandits, noblemen, and deserters of both armies currently engaging in the civil war. All the way at the end of the hallway that leads to every booth, there's a trapdoor which seems to lead to a cave, and now mind you, the interior is fully decorated and lavish. So this cave-like entrance definitely tells us that there's something more going on beneath the trapdoor, especially seeing as how we're greeted by recently deceased peasants. The legends that lie adjacent to the harmless drug den are much more than a sane mortal could swallow. If the player decides to accept Harkon's vampire gift during the Dawnguard questline, he's enrolled into the Volkihar clan of vampires, and one of your first quests in the Volkihar clan are given by Garen, a higher-ranking member of Harkon's court. The essential objective of this quest is to fill an ancient vampiric artifact with the blood of one or more ancient vampires. This artifact is called the Bloodstone Chalice. An artifact that, once filled with its desired blood, can enhance the potency and power of a vampire immensely. And this is exactly why Harkon wants this chalice filled to the brim. Garen gives you the chalice and sends you off to Redwater Den in hopes of you uncovering what happened there, and if the possibility of filling the chalice is still accomplishable. The trapdoor we mentioned earlier leads to a storage room with vats that are obviously used to cook or prepare their specialty, Redwater skooma. The vats are even shrouded in a fluorescent red mist, which indicates that they indeed are cooking the skooma there. After the storage room and small waves of thralls, we end up deep in a former Nordic ruin from the Merethic and First Era. Another alternate way for you to skip the unnecessary adventure through most of the Nordic ruins and waves of thralls is to drink a bottle of Redwater skooma in the drug den above. This will temporarily blur your vision, overwhelming your senses, causing you to enter a vegetative state. And in minutes, you'll suddenly wake up in a rusty cage, deep below in the damp Nordic ruins, overhearing curious thralls and vampires talking about the water that's used to cook the Redwater skooma. The following is what they've said.
So why don't you just drink the blood from the spring? I mean, that seems easier than running a skooma den.
The boss said it's some sort of profaned spring. It looks like blood, but it's not the real thing. Drinking it gives you strength, but it also gets you pretty messed up. That's why we thought of putting it in the skooma.
This conversation clarifies our suspicions of why they've been lacing regular skooma with regular doses of normal skooma. The water from the spring enhances physical strength in every way, but in turn it burdens the person drinking it with a ton of detrimental side effects, which paired with regular skooma increases its addictiveness and efficiency. This can almost regularly put an end to someone's already shattered life. Venerous Vulpin is the main vampire responsible for commandeering all of these vampires, and he was the first vampire to initially lead his followers into the Nordic ruin of Redwater Den that was buried by a sudden earthquake back in the Second Era. Our adventure in this Nordic ruin brings us to his journal and research notes, which even further clarifies why he established a drug den in the basement of an abandoned shack. In one of his notes explaining how he got started and the origins of the spring, he makes a clear distinction between how well vampires and mortals handled the water from the blood spring. He states that, "The blood spring is not everything that I'd hoped it would be. Though it is blood and gives great strength, it provides no sustenance. And the power it grants lasts only for a short while and carries a weakening of the body and mind with it. I've had to lock the door to the chamber to keep the others from becoming completely dependent upon it. When I've tested it on mortals, it is worse for them, for it carries only disease and addiction with no benefits at all." Addiction. I might have just found the solution to our food problem. This, without a doubt, indicates that the drug den was made with the intent of indirectly slaughtering rejects of society that no one would miss, junkies and snarky noblemen. And these bodies would then be used for the sole purpose of satisfying their cannibalistic nature. Smart plan, Vulpin. Masterfully executed. After further exploration and a couple of vicious death hounds, Vulpin's research notes are found, and these notes give us an insight on the origin of the blood spring. Vulpin notes that the blood spring itself used to be a divine spring sacred to Arche, the Adric god of life, or rather the wheel of life. The Nordic Tomb these vampires have ravaged supposedly used to be a temple of Arche, overseen by a priest named Lengir. This priest fell in love with a freak, an oddity, a woman that recently contracted sanguine vampirism, subsequently turning him into a filthy abomination as well. Their newly formed anatomy and physiology overtook all of their reasonable senses, prompting them to go on a rampage out of pure lust for blood and hunger, massacring all of the priests among the waters of the spring, then slowly skulking in the middle, tainting the sacred water devoted to Arche with vampiric and innocent blood while simultaneously asking for Arche's eternal protection, all out of post-combat realization and remorse for what they have done to this once divine spring of the Adra. These were their last words. And as we tore the spine, last priestess, took the viscera into the Bloodstone Chalice, waters ran red forevermore. The actual origin of the chalice is still unknown, but it might have been Lengir's favorite silver chalice that underwent structural changes after being subjected to the blood of the other priests or the blood from the spring, making it a vile artifact of the undead. Vulpin hoped to acquire this chalice, probably so he could successfully form his own vampire clan with much more powerful servants than any other group of vampires, but to no prevail. The player can drink from the bloodspring, but if the aforementioned player isn't a vampire, he'll contract a wide variety of diseases and sanguine vampirism. On the other hand, if the player is a vampire and he drinks directly from the spring, he's granted the effects of tainted blood of the ancients. Before you were dispatched to Redwater Den, two lesser vampires, Vingelmo and Orthiolf, from Harkon's court overheard you and Garen talking about the Bloodstone Chalice, prompting them to send two of their apprentices in order to eliminate the player once he filled the chalice with the desired blood. And the blood in the chalice is potent enough for them to be able to protest Harkon and his court. These apprentices can quickly be eliminated, and their ancient vampiric blood is used to make an even more potent mixture of blood in the Bloodstone Chalice. The outcome of all of this was far more successful than Garen had ever hoped. We put a halt to Harkon's rebellious court members, and we managed to secure a powerful and important artifact for Harkon and his court. Exiting the spring, we encounter the back room of the dealer's booth, and this leads us to the drug den, where the clueless Thralls have no idea that the whole foundation of their scheme has just crumbled into nothing, reduced to rubble. Putting an end to all of these Thralls/vampires would be the merciful solution to their misery. This story intrigued me the moment I laid eyes on the drug den. Something was majorly wrong, and I felt it. Harkon's grand plan of raising his followers' power and finesse is hidden behind a tragic lust for rushed love and rapid influence of a deceiving female, turning a sacred temple of Arcane into a profane spring of death. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like. And maybe you could even check out some of my former videos covering Elder Scrolls and Fallout games. This was Xith. Have a good one.